Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Season 2020 update, part of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for August 14th, 2020, recorded around 1:11 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, once again, we're starting out here in the Eastern Pacific Basin today with a couple of things to discuss. First of all, Tropical Depression 10E, which is located out here, really struggling in this part of the world right now in the far Eastern Pacific Basin. This is because there is still some dry air in this region. Believe it or not, the Eastern Pacific does indeed have dry air. This is also induced by cooler sea surface temperatures out in this region. Further back off towards the east, however, in the Southeast Pacific right now, in the Eastern Pacific Basin, two disturbances we really have to watch. This one right here, this one could be of a land concern, especially for portions of Mexico and the Central American coastline. So if you know anyone or if you live down there, folks down there certainly need to be aware that there could be the potential for some impacts right now. Too early to determine what impacts could occur, but just know that there could be impacts within a 5-day margin in this general vicinity because of some rain, some wind, etc. That's something we'll have to keep an eye on. And there's also two other disturbances out there. This is the other one we'll need to keep an eye on as this generally moves off towards the north here over the next few days or so. Other than that, no other land concerns at the moment. Now, why we keep starting out in the Eastern Pacific Basin? Well, as I keep saying, this gives us a lot of clues to what's going to happen down the line and down the road in the Atlantic Basin. And if you take a look here at the Madden-Julian Oscillation, this comes from Michael Ventris, by the way, his website. And this is the Madden-Julian Oscillation looking at the velocity potential at 200 millibars in the atmosphere. These reds are your suppressive air in the environment. This typically suppresses hurricane development. And this blue and purple, that is your enhancing wave that typically enhances hurricane development. And you can see where all that enhanced air and rising motion in the atmosphere is located right now. Over the Eastern Pacific Basin and basically the Central Pacific as well. But you have a big concentration of activity right now in the Eastern Pacific. And that is in response because of this Madden-Julian Oscillation, enhanced convectively coupled Kelvin wave that is going on across this area. And one thing I do want to ask you guys is comment down below in the comment section down below when you guys think hurricane activity will begin to switch over into the Atlantic Basin. I want to hear from you guys on that and see what you guys think as well. But this is why we have all the activity in the Eastern Pacific right now, and this Madden-Julian Oscillation in the suppressed phase across the Atlantic Basin. However, we do have a tropical storm in the Atlantic Basin and what is likely to be Tropical Storm Kyle, and we'll talk about that here in a minute off the Carolina coast. But Tropical Storm Josephine out here, sustained winds of 35 knots or 40 miles per hour with gusts up to about 45 to 50. Moving west-northwest at 16 miles per hour, no threat to land. However, of course, if you live in any of the land masses, just pay close attention or, pay some attention until this really kind of scoots on by. It doesn't hurt to kind of keep track in these things. Of course, it is the hurricane season. We need to be prepared anyway, especially for what's going to come here. But again, really and truly, the strong upper level winds, all your rising motion over the Eastern Pacific is causing subsidence and dry air over the Atlantic Basin currently. And that is one thing that is really going to significantly hinder significant organization of Josephine and certainly not really allowing for much in the way of strong activity in the main development region currently. And one way we can kind of take a look at this is looking at the visible satellite from tropicaltidbits.com. And a couple of things to point out here. First of all, notice this very disheveled look in our tropical storm right now. Again, this is what we are talking about. It's very disorganized right now. And you can actually see some arc clouds racing away from the center of Josephine, and that is in response to a lot of dry air that is kind of around the system. Again, a lot of that dry air and subsidence is also in response to a suppressed Kelvin wave that came across the main development region a couple of days ago. That is also now helping to impart some subsidence and dry air in this vicinity, and that is one thing that is also kind of hindering Josephine from actually taking advantage of these warm sea surface temperatures in this region. Now, some intensification may be possible today, but we're really not expecting significant organization as time goes on. These arc clouds out here, indicative of dry air. You can also see that what's happening is you're starting to see more of this low-level center become visible and exposed here on the satellite. This is indicative of vortex tilting and wind shear across the area. We have this wind shear that's tilting the vortex over, kind of leaving a partially exposed center in this region, and that is likely to be kind of the story now throughout the rest of Josephine's journey into its eventual demise out here in the North Atlantic. Again, this may produce some swells here for the leewards and lesser Antilles, but again, we're not really expecting anything out here. And for Bermuda, again, maybe a passing rain shower as this weakens out here, but we're really not expecting anything significant at that point in time. Now, in the North Atlantic Basin, north of Bermuda, and a little bit off the coast of the North Carolina coast, we have Invest Area 96L with a 50% chance over the next 5 days, although I think at 5 o'clock this evening this will be a named storm. I'll talk about that here in a minute. This is no significant land concern, but of course, if you are in the shipping industry, this could be of concern for the marine interest out here. But other than that, this is going to scoot on by and could even become a hurricane out here. And I'll talk about why that is here in a second. The visible satellite imagery looking rather impressive here from Tropical Tibbets. Again, you can see the convection starting to kind of curl up. Our center is located in about here. Fairly dry westerly side here. Again, that's in part because it is pulling some of that dry air off the continental United States, and that is getting wrapped around, of course, into the center. The low pressure is a counterclockwise circulation, so that is helping to bring off some of the dry, stable air from the continental United States and bring that into our core. But right now, you could start to see that convection wrapping around, even some outflow on the south and southeastern sides of this. So it is starting to become better organized. Got a banding structure evident here with that kind of curling in, that comma head structure shape. So it is looking pretty good. And if we take a look here at the scatterometer pass from just a little while ago, this is basically the satellite-derived wind, the wind measurements and the wind barbs suggesting which direction the winds are traveling. And you can see here from the scatterometer pass, this was from about 14 Z's, so a little before about, I believe, 12 o'clock or probably 1 o'clock actually. But you can kind of see how we have this curvature, and that curvature is very evident in here, suggesting we could have a closed low-level center of circulation somewhere in about here. And again, this would suggest that we are probably well on its way to becoming a tropical depression or storm. Even some 35-knot wind barbs here to the south-southeast of the center, with about 30 knots on the southeastern side. This would likely be classified as a tropical depression or storm by the 5 o'clock advisory. Given that low-level center, it does appear to be closed. But again, this now is not going to be a threat to land, only shipping interest. So if you are in the shipping industry, it's a big deal. But for land concerns, no longer a significant big deal at all. Now, one of the things that is going to be not surprising is if this thing becomes a hurricane. Right now, it's sitting off here in the relatively warm Gulf Stream, and that is going to be following this Gulf Stream all the way up in here. This is the upper ocean heat content values updated as of this morning. And again, all these reds, yellows, this is basically your higher upper ocean heat content values. and your more latent heat release potential in the atmosphere. And let me know in the comment section down below if you guys think this will become a hurricane. I'm, once again, interested in hearing what you guys think about that. But you can see this is going to scoot off towards kind of the northeast here, and it's going to be firmly entrenched in this Gulf Stream water, even all the way out here into the far North Atlantic. So it's going to have a while. Now this will be moving at about 20-25 miles per hour, so it's not going to be able to just kind of sit there, but it could still become a fairly modest tropical storm. Even a hurricane would not surprise me, but again, not going to be any land concern at the moment. But across the rest of the Atlantic Basin, the upper ocean heat content values are just stifling down here in the Caribbean. And this is one of the things that we really have to start paying attention to, is as we start getting a more favorable phase in this part of the world out here, is that going to eventually lead to something in the Caribbean in a very favorable environment thermodynamically? Because these upper ocean heat content values are literally off the top here at about 150 joules per kilogram, past that even. I believe it's joules per kilogram. I'm not quite sure. But again, it's going to be very, very warm. You could imagine going down at depth into the water. You basically retain your 80-degree isotherm down at a pretty significant depth. So when these tropical cyclones come through here, they're not going to upwell cooler water. Marginally cooler, but enough to sustain tropical cyclone intensification and maintenance, and that is going to be of significant concern out here, certainly as we get closer to the peak of the season, which is on September 10th. And one of the things that we keep talking about here is the Madden-Julian Oscillation and how that phase is going to cross from the Eastern Pacific into the Atlantic. And you can see, once again, this is the active phase branch right here that's in the Eastern Pacific. And you notice we'll go out here to the week 1 forecast that actually amplifies into week 1 across Central America in the Eastern Pacific. Into week 2, the interpolated and extrapolated forecast now brings this enhansive branch over the Atlantic Basin. And this is really when we're going to start to see activity blossom. This is the 22nd through 28th of August out here, and we can see where this is right now. This is the 14th. This is as of today. This dry suppressive air across the Atlantic Basin and across Africa now. It's still spitting out tropical waves, by the way. And then you get these enhancive waves that come over. They will now pass into Africa, and this is basically a cycle. You get this suppressive phase that kind of leaves Africa in the Indian Ocean. That now corresponds into the Eastern Pacific, and this active branch, this active phase, will now move into the Atlantic Basin and then over Africa, and it starts kind of this whole cycle. So you'll get these interseasonal variabilities, and what's going to probably happen is this active phase of the Madden-Julian Oscillation is just going to amplify across the Atlantic Basin, across Africa in the Indian Ocean, and then just kind of sit there for several weeks. And that is when we are likely to have a fairly significant burst or a potential even outbreak of tropical cyclones across the Atlantic Basin. We'll really have to watch that as time goes on. This is courtesy of Todd Kimberlin over on Twitter, and also courtesy of weathermodels.com. This is the European ensembles and the 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. Again, your reds in here in oranges, that's your west wind, your westerly wind, and your blues and greens is your easterly wind. And you can see this is where we're starting out here August 5th. Again, this correlates to the Atlantic Basin out here. This part roughly correlates to the Eastern Pacific Basin. And we can really see this is August 15th and that's August 29th down there. And we can actually really see this work out pretty well, is that we are actually in a little bit of an easterly wind event right now in the Atlantic Basin. Again, that roughly correlates to the portions of the Eastern Atlantic and Africa over here. But notice what's going to happen. We get this fairly strong westerly wind event across most of the Atlantic Basin out here from roughly August 21st all the way now through about the 29th. And even into September, it looks like. And that westerly wind, typically, we talked about how this warms the Atlantic. Not only does it warm the Atlantic Basin, but it creates cyclonic spin in the atmosphere at about 5,000 feet. That's what 850 millibars is. That's that level in the atmosphere. That creates and induces cyclonic spin. That reduces the trade winds. And another way we can kind of take a look at that is, once again, through the mean ensemble, mean sea level pressures here. And these reds, that's your higher sea level pressures, and that increases trade winds across the Atlantic. And your blue and green, this is all of your lower pressures. And basically, this is hour 276. Yeah, it's far out there in time, but these are larger scale features that we can easily better predict with accuracy. We can see this big sprawling ridge of high pressure out here across basically the entire Atlantic Basin. That's concerning. But we also have a fairly strong pressure out here that is lower than average, and fairly significant values of over 2 here, the 2 sigma values that are across the eastern Atlantic and the Cabo Verde Islands, stretching all the way out into the islands here. Combine this with the 200 millibar winds and basically your shear values in the atmosphere. Anticyclonic spin over here dominating this area, anticyclonic spin over here dominating this area. Yeah, maybe of a tut feature across this region. But this is pretty much as favorable as a look as you can get. And with that Madden-Julian oscillation crossing from the eastern Pacific into the Atlantic and over Africa in the Indian Ocean, that is going to really excite the African standing wave, and that is going to promote these strong tropical waves to roll off one after another over Africa. Believe me when I say this, we are going to have a pretty active peak of the hurricane season. If we don't, great. But we have to be ready now, especially if you're in a hurricane-prone area. The islands out here, obviously, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Florida, Gulf Coast, East Coast, whatever. You need to be ready because it is going to be busy. And this isn't a hyper scare, but it is going to be busy. And when we see these signs and these larger scale features in time that we have accuracy and skill predicting, and combined, we're going to have 11 named storms before August 15th, more than likely. That's crazy insane. We've had 2 hurricanes originating from the main development region in July and I believe parts of August. You know, this is insane. And we're beating 2005 records in terms of named storms. Now, the accumulated cyclone energy, the ACE index, is reasonably lower. We had a lot of early season waves, tropical storms that formed from non-tropical waves in just kind of extratropical features out here across the Carolinas. One out here with the formation of Arthur and Bertha, of course, Aguardo, etc. But in the last couple of weeks, especially with the Madden-Julian oscillation pass, one of the active phases that passed through, you got Isaias, you had Hannah, Tropical Depression 10, you know, and now you're getting Josephine in an unfavorable base state in the Atlantic under a suppressive Kelvin wave. What more can I say? That is a testament to how favorable the Atlantic Basin really is. And when those lights pop up, the lid is going to pop off, and I'm telling you, you have to be ready. Again, that's not to scare anybody. That's not to cause any panic or hyper or whatever nonsense that you see from some, but we're trying to get you prepared. I don't want anyone to become another statistic and die from a lack of unpreparedness. That is my bottom line. That's why I'm here to help you guys. And I hope you guys appreciate that, and I certainly enjoy doing this. But with all that blabber being said, this is the GFS forecast, the 850 millibar winds and a cyclonic spin in the atmosphere. For reference, that's Josephine right there. This is 96L. And again, we can just play this out in time. Again, that, becomes likely Tropical Storm Kyle. That's the remnants of Josephine out there in the North Atlantic Basin. This system will really have to watch in the Eastern Pacific. I also want to emphasize this. The GFS forecast, and we can take a look at this here by looking at our 200 to 800 millibar shear. And the GFS forecast here is absolutely nonsense. So we'll go out here to about August 23rd. We'll go 25th, actually. The GFS forecast is nonsense. And the reason why, this is a lot of shear across the Eastern Pacific, or the Atlantic Basin, rather. Highlight that in a better color. There we go. That's a lot of shear. And I'm not buying it for multiple reasons, but the GFS hasn't really been doing the Kelvin wave strength, the propagation of that, and the propagation of the Madden-Julian oscillation correctly. It's not been modeling that correct. And what it in fact does is it just basically creates a standing wave of energy over here with the Madden-Julian oscillation, and it does not correctly propagate that into the Atlantic Basin and over Africa in the Indian Ocean. So with that being said, I'm not going to discount the GFS right now. I'm not going to say that, if it doesn't spin up tropical cyclones, that, all right, whatever. But right now, I can't fully trust the GFS. And the European ensembles, for what it's worth, I don't have this pulled up, and I really should have, but for what it's worth, the European ensembles out, hour 240 or whatever, does have more tropical waves coming off and trying to develop, and some of them, do go on to develop on the European ensembles. So with that being said, the GFS ensembles, I haven't looked at them. We can actually look at that right now, the GEFS models, and we'll pull up the ensemble mean sea level pressure out here. You can see hour 264, this is about when the Kelvin wave is passing over, or the Madden-Julian oscillation is passing over, nothing. And we'll even run this out even further, nothing. So I'm not really buying the GFS and the GEFS models, and I think that that's kind of a good discriminate, that's kind of an outlier, a discriminatory, thing. We're going to discriminate that model for now. We're going to kind of throw it in the back there. We hope nothing happens, but the way the signs, the stage is just set, and it looks to be a pretty busy season, especially for the peak and then into September and probably even October. So, again, we'll have to watch that over the next several days or so. I bet come by Monday, we'll probably have something to talk about. And leave your comments down below. Leave your thoughts down below in the comment section regarding the GFS forecast and what you guys think about that. All right. With that being said, it's time for me to sign off, getting a little bit of a longer video today, but hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. Hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Stay safe. I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow afternoon. Stay safe, everyone. Talk to you guys tomorrow.